Hey gamers, my name is Mark and this is Late to the Game, a channel in which we talk about gaming news, and I do my best to play all the games I haven't touched yet, to give you a deep dive, retrospective, and ask the question, is this game still worth playing? Well, since Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has just hit the streets, many gamers are asking the question, should I play Remake first? And while narrative may be lost, you could easily start with Rebirth and enjoy the game, but the ultimate question is, should you play Remake first? But before we answer that question, I want to take a few minutes to talk about the importance of the original release, the development and history of Remake, as well as my late review of Final Fantasy Remake itself. The original Final Fantasy VII released to critical acclaim in 1997, first on PS1 and soon after on PC, and gamers loved the immersive world, the unique storytelling, and stellar gameplay, and fantastic characters. Now, between the original release on PlayStation and PC and the eventual HD re-release on Steam and modern consoles, it stands as the second highest selling Square game of all time, with 14.99 million units sold, only behind the wildly popular Final Fantasy XIV. And while the Final Fantasy franchise continued to release stellar mainline entries, fans still clamored for a return to the beloved world of Final Fantasy VII, and in the early 2000s, those fans were teased even more when Square had announced a remake of not only 7, but also 9 for the PS2. One could imagine they would have been similar to the Final Fantasy 3 and 4 remakes that hit the Nintendo DS years later. Still, the announcement was fruitless, as those plans were eventually canceled as Square was struggling to develop for the new hardware and decided it wasn't yet the time. Demand only increased throughout the mid and late 2000s though. After a 2005 PS3 demo in which they showcased the opening sequence of Final Fantasy VII to show off the power of the PS3 and Square's new Crystal Tools engine, fans were stoked at the potential of a remake like that technical demo, and were hopeful something was in store for 2007, the 10-year anniversary of the original release. At last though, Square reiterated multiple times denied any remake was in development, to the disappointment of many fans. It wasn't until a few years later when Square producer Shinji Hashimoto broached the subject up to Kitase, Nojima, and Nomura that it was finally time to enter development. And by late 2015, the game had entered full production with Square Enix's business division 1. Now, the team had a lot of decisions to make. For example, should they split up the game or release it as a single title? If they did the latter, they realized they couldn't achieve that without cutting a lot of content, which fans would hate. So they went with the former, and their next decision was that they wanted the game to be both a new and nostalgic feeling at the same time, and my gosh, did they achieve this. But did fans appreciate the changes? Overall, yes, the game was generally well received to both fans and critics, whether it was the stunning graphics and visuals, the fantastic remade music and soundtrack, or the updated real-time combat system. Their brilliant attention to detail on creating the world of Midgar was something beloved by all. Now, while many fans loved the expanded storytelling as well, this was probably the most polarizing aspect of the release, with many gamers debating, was it worth it? Along with their decision to do an episodic release and the somewhat linear feel of the game at times, these are the things that split the Final Fantasy community somewhat. Now, most people liked the game, but it was still a polarizing aspect, which is where I want to dive in and answer some of those perspectives from my own. First off, the game is fantastic. As I already mentioned, it truly is a beautiful game, from the gameplay sessions itself to the jaw-dropping cutscenes. And in regards to Square's decision to create an expanded and episodic release, I 100% get the reason why. When you're revisiting a truly beloved title from 27 years ago that was released on a widely different state of technology, two things are happening. One being the need to simply polish up the game and gameplay itself by implementing current best practices. Perhaps more importantly, folks like Nomura and Hashimoto have an opportunity to more fully realize their dream for the world at hand, and more strongly connect the dots from all the other releases in this 7 franchise, from Crisis Core to Dirge of Cerberus. They have an opportunity to bring to life the original opus in a more complete and fully realized vision, as well as having that ever-creative itch to do something new with it as well. This is largely why it's a remake and not simply a remaster. You can provide updated graphics and features for new hardware and just release it to the world, but a remake entails digging back into the roots of the game itself and building again from the ground up, keeping everything from the original, and thanks to new technology learnings, they were finally able to capture everything about the world of Final Fantasy VII that was released within the compilation of Final Fantasy VII games. movies, books, and spin-offs. It was an opportunity to truly create something they always had in mind. Now, the larger question, should you still play it today, before Rebirth? Well, again, you technically don't have to. I would unequivocally say yes. Remake does an amazing job in introducing and developing the title's core characters, and by the end, you're easily left wanting more. Now, while the game is about 4.5 years old today, it plays better than a ton of RPGs to this day. It has an engaging combat system blending the best of the base Final Fantasy VII elements with smooth, action-oriented combat. The emotive soundtrack combined with the powerful storytelling truly made me connect with the characters in this game, and you'll be kept on the edge of your seat throughout the entirety of it. And yes, while the first release of the Remake trilogy is technically more linear than the other Final Fantasy games, I think with their design intent for this resurrected story, you must need to keep it more contained. For one, Midgar wasn't a super open experience in the original, compared to when you leave. And two, even so, the game mixes in a heavy bevy of chapters which offer a ton of side quests in a more open environment alongside it that makes sense with the developing story at the time. Now, while some chapters are more open, others, for example, once you enter the Shinra building at the end, make perfect sense for being more linear. And don't worry, you're going to experience stellar combat and enemies throughout the entire game, with chapter 17 and 18 being some freaking fantastic highlights to cap off the game. So, to recap, the original Final Fantasy VII is the cream of the crop when it comes to these games, and a passionate team who worked on the original game are behind the reins on this remake trilogy. Yes, there are changes, but their changes are from the folks who had the original vision itself, and they personally felt now was the time to release these games before they got too old and had to leave it for individuals who weren't even there in 1997. The game is fantastic, and while it's less open world than Rebirth, which story-wise, again, makes sense, you could technically play Rebirth. I would advise all my friends to play Remake first. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Did you skip Remake, or are you just now playing it like I did to get ready for Rebirth? Are you a huge fan of the original, or is this your first exposure to the world of Final Fantasy VII and all? Do you like the expansions on the story, or would you have preferred the team to keep it 100% the same? Let me know your thoughts below, hit that like button, and as always, happy gaming.